Pardon me. Okay, so welcome everybody, and thank you for coming. Lots of keen volunteers, hopefully, as are we all. Yeah, so this event is part of our monthly online events, which we're going to be running from now onwards, alternating between a webinar like this, which is more information giving, and an introduction to each of our member organizations. And we had the first one last month from Sweden, which was wonderful. And the next one, I think, is from Belgium. So we're going to be running at this time on the last Friday of every month. There will be an event just like this. If you want to put that into your diaries, always good to have it in your diary. So this one, we're going to be looking at something which we all in every community and right across the rural movements is absolutely critical as the foundation of our communities' lives, especially in rural areas. And it's how we make our communities work, it's how we form our community bonds, it's how we help each other, it's how we enjoy ourselves, volunteering. So through my own career, which is now rather long in rural and community development and working across Europe, as well as here and in my own community, I've seen how much action and well-being in any rural community is founded on volunteer work. But unfortunately, the true value of volunteering is not generally recognized by our governments. And I don't know if we've got anybody from Finland here, but I do remember that in Finland, the Finnish Village Movement has done research to count volunteer time. And it was incredibly impressive. I don't have the figures, unfortunately, but maybe somebody from Finland does if they're here. It was absolutely huge. And the contribution to the economy was equally huge because each of those man hours is actually a contribution of money because otherwise you would have to pay for them. And when you calculate all that up, actually to any economy and to the well-being of any society, volunteering is totally critical, absolutely critical. I think in Finland, there was a survey that said in 2006, it was calculated that 50% of the Finnish population were involved in volunteering. I worked in Norway for about 6 months and for a longer period, from Scotland. And one thing that was really, really obvious to me when I was living there was the Norwegian concept of dugnad. And dugnad is an old Norse word, which means help, a good deed, power, and support. And so dugnad was a system, and it was also an unspoken expectation in Norway that people will participate in dugnad, in volunteering, to contribute to their community. From my own experience of working in Norway, I would say it was almost a religion. It was so important. Now, we have that in Scotland as well, but it's not a religion. It's something that lots of people do, and lots of people can complain about a lot of the time that they're putting in so many hours and it's so difficult, and you get burnout and all the rest of it, and the usual suspects, and I don't know what. There's a lot of issues around it. But nonetheless, we do a huge amount of volunteering. So during this webinar, I'm hoping we will, in a little while, get the chance to share our experiences across Europe about volunteering in our own countries. But first, we're going to focus on Ireland. And I don't know much about the Irish system, but I'm told it's a very, very interesting system and a very impressive system. And we've got different speakers coming up now. And I think Ben will introduce the speakers. We'll then have some workshops, breakout groups, and we'll then come back for a final plenary at the end of the session. So enjoy yourselves and looking forward to hearing about Ireland.
Well, thanks very much, Vanessa, for this nice introduction. And as you have said, we are starting with the experiences of Ireland. And our first speaker, it's a pleasure for me to introduce Eva O'Brien. She is an assistant principal officer in the Department of Rural and Community Development, where she is responsible for volunteering, policy and public participation networks. Eva is a long-time civil servant, having previously spent 12 years in the Department of Health. She has a background in social science and social research, and before joining the civil service, worked in a number of research roles in the public sector. So, Eva, the floor is yours.
Thanks very much, Ben. I'm just going to share my presentation. I hope it'll worked in the trial, so hopefully it'll work this morning too. Can everyone see that?
Yep.
Yeah, great. So thank you very much, Ben, as I said, and good morning, everyone. It's a real pleasure to be here this morning and have the opportunity to speak. So just to start by saying thanks very much to Louise and to Irish Rural Link for very kindly inviting the department to take part. As Ben has said, my name is Aoife O'Brien. I work in the Community and Voluntary Supports and Programmes Unit in the Department of Rural and Community Development, and volunteering policy is one of my two areas of responsibility. I thought, as you're mainly a European audience, it might be useful to start by giving you a bit of background on the department and our priorities. So our current statement of strategy was developed in 2023. It sets out our vision, which is of a sustainable society with individual and community well-being at its heart, supporting thriving rural communities, and where all communities, urban and rural, have opportunities to grow and develop economically, socially and culturally. We're currently preparing a new statement of strategy because the department is changing a little bit, and we're taking on the responsibility for the Gaeltacht, that's the Irish language function, soon. So we expect that the vision will, though, largely transfer over to the new department, maybe with just a few additions to reflect the new brief. So for the time being and into the future, we expect two of the department's 5 strategic goals include a focus on volunteering. As you can see there on the slide, Goal 3 is to support empowered, inclusive and resilient communities and a thriving volunteer culture. And Goal 4 is to enable the community, voluntary, charity, philanthropic and social economy sectors to contribute fully to civil society. So for us as a department, there's a very clear benefit to society, as Vanessa was saying, and to the individual from volunteering, and that is reflected in our vision and our remit. The role of my own unit, the Community and Voluntary Supports and Programmes, is to provide support and capacity building across the community and voluntary sector. Our unit is responsible for the delivery of a number of funding programmes and policy initiatives which are designed to collectively support and build the development of vibrant, inclusive and sustainable communities and charities. We advocate for the needs of the community and voluntary sector, making the case each year to government through the annual budgetary process. Some of our achievements in recent years, just to blow our own trumpet, have included securing increased funding for the scheme to strengthen and support volunteering, which has gone from 3.1 million in 2020 to 7.3 million euro this year. We provided additional supports for volunteering during the pandemic, and also additional funding for the volunteering response to the Ukraine crisis, which was then broadened to include integration more generally and cover international protection applicants as well. We also deliver a number of funding programmes, including the Senior Alert Scheme and the Scheme to Support National Organisations, which largely covers community and voluntary organisations. So the areas that we look after in the unit are really diverse and they're not all connected, but they do all have a common thread running through them, and that's the dependence on volunteers. So whether in Water Safety Ireland, which has a network of over 5,000 volunteers, in the charity sector, the public participation networks, and all of the various community organisations that we interact with, all rely on volunteers to give them life and to achieve their aims. As a unit, we can very clearly see that volunteering brings enormous benefits both to society and to the individual. For society, volunteers provide help in times of need when the state is struggling to support people, but they also provide more unseen services to society as well. I think Vanessa already mentioned this, that huge contribution they make to social cohesion, building ties in communities, helping people skills and share learning. But for individuals too, volunteering has enormous benefits. Just that act of meeting people and feeling a deeper connection to your local community, helping to build a person's skills and confidence. And really, generally, we've as a department, as a unit, but as a department, we can see that volunteering really does have a huge impact on both a person's own and a community's sense of well-being. So from that perspective, one of the really key areas of our work in the unit is the implementation of the National Volunteering Strategy 2021 to 2025. Our former Minister of State, Joe O'Brien, launched the National Volunteering Strategy in December 2020 on International Volunteering Day, and it's a whole of government framework to support volunteering and the voluntary sector. The development of the strategy was a collaboration between government, state agencies, and all the key stakeholders, including volunteers, volunteer centres, volunteer involving organisations, and the national advocacy bodies. The purpose of the strategy is to recognise, support, and promote the unique value and contribution of volunteers to Irish society. And its vision is of a society where volunteering is promoted, valued, facilitated, and supported so that people can contribute to developing and maintaining vibrant, inclusive, and sustainable communities. For us, one of the key parts of the strategy too is that it provides an opportunity for the government to acknowledge how important volunteering is to the well-being of the nation, and it steers the delivery of an agreed and ambitious vision. The strategy defines volunteering as any time willingly given, either formally or informally, for the common good and without financial gain. So it takes a very wide view, including the activities which people would typically recognise as volunteering, like giving their time regularly to work with an organisation or a group. But it also encompasses the type of informal or unacknowledged volunteering that many people in Ireland, I know, would just see as being neighbourly or lending a hand. As I mentioned, the strategy was researched, produced and presented in collaboration with our stakeholders. And as a department, we've worked hard to make sure that that cooperation with stakeholders has continued throughout its lifetime. We had an implementation group, which was established in March 2021, that includes sectoral stakeholders as well as representatives from key government departments and state agencies. And we've also had a number of subgroups on themed areas to give stakeholders an opportunity to collaborate on progressing the actions and the priorities set out in the strategy. Those subgroups have included research, communications, IT, capacity building, and international volunteering. The strategy comprises a suite of policy and strategic initiatives to support volunteers, their representative groups, and a range of not-for-profit organisations. There are 5 strategic objectives set out in the strategy and 56 associated actions. So I will not go through the 56 actions, but I've just put the 5 strategic objectives there on the slide so you can get a sense of what's in the strategy. The department has overall responsibility for implementation of the strategy, but we have worked, as I say, in collaboration with our partners to deliver the actions. We've worked with other government departments, with the volunteer centres, volunteer involving organisations, and of course Volunteer Ireland, who've been a key partner in progressing many of the pieces of work. We have made good headway in implementing the strategy, with many of the actions already completed or in progress. And we are really pleased to have been able to do that, given the challenges that everyone has faced over the last 5 years, dealing with unexpected world events like the pandemic and the Ukraine crisis. I've just put a few things on the slide here to show some of the actions we've made good progress on or have completed. So for example, Action 15 is to support the ongoing development of IVOL, which is a national volunteering database. We've funded the recruitment of an administrator who is now in place in Volunteer Ireland, looking after that work. Under Action 29, volunteer information centres were to be upgraded to full volunteer centres. That was completed in 2021. And we're really pleased to now be funding the network of 29 volunteer centres that's in place across the country. Volunteer centres form a critical part of the volunteering infrastructure in Ireland. And I think they are quite unique in Europe. We certainly place a very high premium on the good relationships that we have as a department with each of the centres. Our work is very much a collaboration with them rather than giving them direction, because as the organisations on the ground, they are the experts here on volunteering and on volunteer management, and we're very much aware of that and work with them rather than telling them what to do. They're the experts. Under Action 32, we provide funding to support local and national award ceremonies each year. This includes Volunteer Ireland's National Volunteer Awards, as well as National Volunteer Awards presented by Carmichael, a not-for-profit organisation. But it also includes funding for local volunteer recognition events, which are held by the volunteer centres across the country, to let their volunteers know that their contribution is recognised, valued and appreciated. Action 34 of the strategy was to include a question on volunteering on the 2022 census of the population, which was achieved, and we do hope to continue that in the future. And under Action 56, we've been working with Volunteer Ireland and the volunteer centres for over 4 years now to establish and support a reserve volunteering corps, which is now called the Community Volunteers Programme. As well as being an action in the strategy, it was also a commitment in the last programme for government, so it has been really has been a priority for everyone. The programme was set up on a pilot basis in 2021, and we've been providing funding and support for it since then. We're currently undertaking a review of the programme with a view to developing a sustainable model for its delivery into the future. And I know Vicky from Volunteer Ireland is here this morning and going to present on the project. So she's the expert, and I'll leave all the detail to her, but it's a really interesting programme. I thought I'd also just give you a flavour of some of the work which we are progressing this year as a department. So one of the things I'm very excited about is partnering with Research Ireland to commission a piece of research on the economic and social impact of volunteering on the Irish economy. So it was really interesting to hear from Vanessa that Finland has done some work in that area already. I think it's going to be a really great piece of research if we can get a good piece of research. I'm so excited about it. Building on work done in the last couple of years to develop a national communication strategy, one of our priorities in the department this year is to deliver a volunteering communications campaign. We've been working with our communications unit to progress work on the area, and subject to our new minister's approval, we hope to be in a position to launch a national campaign later this year. We're also rolling out a new funding model for volunteer centres in the second half of the year, which will ensure that sustainable funding is in place for the volunteer centres, which really are vital volunteering infrastructure. So as we move forward, we hope that piece of work will bring the volunteer centres with us. In recent years, it's also become clear that people want volunteering opportunities that will fit in with their lives, rather than the more traditional volunteering roles that ask people to commit to a regular ongoing activity. So we expect to receive a report from Volunteer Ireland shortly on a project that we funded them on the development of more flexible volunteering opportunities, which covers a number of actions in the strategy. But it's looking at developing flexible task-based short-term or episodic volunteering roles, and it will provide guidance and support for volunteer involving organisations in the area. And finally, as I mentioned already, we have that really important review of the pilot community volunteers programme, and we do hope to be rolling out a more sustainable operating model in the second half of the year. As I mentioned, one of our work areas every year is to highlight the importance of volunteering and to advocate for the allocation of funding through the budget to support the sector and to support volunteers themselves. So we were really pleased that volunteering has been included in the new programme for government securing Ireland's future, and that programme for government makes a commitment to publish a new national volunteering strategy. So that was really good news for us and for the sector, I hope too. And that actually brings us just to the very biggest piece of work that we have in our plan for this year, which is the development of the second national volunteering strategy for Ireland. We're still in the very early stages of the work on the project at the moment, working through the planning phase and broadly considering the shape of the document. But we expect that the second strategy will look to build on the progress made by the first. We want to strengthen the volunteering infrastructure, continue to progress areas of best practice, and make sure that support for and recognition of the value of volunteering is sustainable into the future. As with all policies developed in our department, we plan to work with the sector to develop the new strategy, continuing that collaboration and cooperation which has characterised the current policy. And while we don't want to be prescriptive about the content of the new strategy, at the moment we think it's likely to be a shorter, more concise document than the first, with higher level goals and actions, really because the landscape has changed considerably since the first strategy was published 5 years ago. So we think it's only right that the new version recognises and builds on the progress that we've made since then. And finally, I just wanted to end by saying, if it doesn't sound too horrifically optimistic, that the silver lining during the last 5 challenging years really has been that spotlight that it has shone on the value of volunteers and volunteering. Volunteers and volunteering involving organisations have been at the forefront of the response to many of the challenges posed by the pandemic, by the crisis in Ukraine, and also to domestic challenges. We had Storm Éowyn here a little earlier this year, and it really was the volunteers and the volunteering organisations that were to the forefront of the response. We think that the spotlight really does give us the opportunity to develop a second volunteering strategy that will keep the focus on the value of volunteering and ensure that support for the sector is sustained. Before finishing, I did just want to take a minute as well as a representative of the department to acknowledge again the huge contribution that volunteers make to Irish society, and I'm sure to society across Europe. But I did want to express our appreciation for volunteers and for all you do and for all that volunteer involving organisations do too. I have just popped our email address on the slide there, so if anyone has questions afterwards or if you'd like to get in touch, please do drop us a line. We're always delighted to hear from people. And thank you all very much for your attention this morning. Thank you.
Well, thanks very much, Eva. A great presentation. We have a few moments for if there are any questions, please raise your hand. Or so Ireland, this was the first strategy on volunteering. What was really the cause to come to a strategy? Because I think I don't know for sure, but it's unique that Ireland has such a strong strategy. What was the cause to start it?
I think it was a long time coming. Actually, I was going through our archives in the department recently, and I think there were various other papers a long time before the strategy was published. So I think the push was there. I think Ireland does have a huge reliance on volunteers and on volunteer involving organisations. And I don't know if there was just a critical head of steam built up, but I know there were white papers and green papers and all kinds of research reports published. It was a long road to get it to a strategy. It may not be a coincidence as well that the strategy was published in 2020, when I think just the massive spotlight began to shine on volunteers like never before. So I'm not an expert, and I think if we had some of the people from Volunteer Ireland and from the sector here, they would be able to give you the history a lot better than I could. But I do sense that there was a lot of work over a lot of years that went into developing it. So critical head of steam, I suspect.
Yeah. Okay, thanks. Are there any other questions? If not for now, then we could go to Vicky, because I think she will be there will be a lot connection in her story. So it's a pleasure for me to introduce Vicky O'Connell. She has been the Community Volunteers Program Manager with Volunteering Ireland since March 2023. Before this, she was a part of the training and capacity building team, also with Volunteer Ireland. As well as this, she has worked in a local volunteer center and supported volunteers for a number of years in a variety of not-for-profit organizations. She has enjoyed many different volunteer roles over the years and is currently a board member for a charity for people who are deaf-blind, and enjoys a bit of beach cleaning when she can. Beach cleaning. Vicky, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Everybody should do a bit of beach cleaning. It's good.
Yeah.
It's good for the soul.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll just share my screen. Okay. Okay, so I'm Vicky O'Connell, as I have been introduced, the Community Volunteers Programme Manager with Volunteer Ireland. So Eva mentioned us, but just a bit more about who we are. So we are the leading body for volunteer development across the country, across Ireland, and our mission is to empower individuals, communities and organisations to engage in meaningful volunteer work So amongst other things, we support and collaborate with the network of 29 volunteer centres that Eva mentioned, and I will explain more about them a little bit. We work to spread the word about volunteering and its positive impact, and we do this with campaigns and events such as National Volunteering Week, which is happening in May every year. And we also study trends and challenges to find ways to improve volunteering for everyone. We're also partners in Erasmus Plus projects, which always have volunteering as a focus. So we support volunteer involving organisations by guiding them on how to best manage their volunteers. We provide resources and advice on best practices, and can also help with creating policies and maybe ensuring safety, diversity, any manner of things. We also provide services to community and voluntary organisations across Ireland, offering services to meet their particular needs. We manage IVOL, which is Ireland's national volunteering database, connecting volunteers with opportunities across the country, and it just basically helps to make volunteering that bit more accessible. And we host the National Volunteer Awards, which is always a great night to recognise the amazing contributions of volunteers across Ireland. We celebrate individuals and groups who support their communities in areas like education, healthcare, social services, the environment. We also support the corporate sector. We understand the importance of that corporate social responsibility and how businesses can give back to their communities. We work closely with companies to create meaningful volunteer opportunities for employees that do benefit their local community. And also collaboration, as we were talking about, is vital for volunteering in Ireland. And we work with many different partners, such as the Department of Rural and Community Development, volunteer centres, and many others to support the National Volunteer Strategy. One action from the strategy that we've launched recently is the Volunteer Charter. And this charter comes in two different segments, one for organisations and one for volunteers, and it's used to clarify expectations from both sides. So when a volunteer takes up a role in an organisation. So if you want to know more about the Volunteer Charter, you can see the address there, volunteer.ie/the Volunteer Charter /. Okay, volunteer centres. So as we've said, there's 29 in Ireland. So there's one in each county, and there is 4 in Dublin. And they provide a wide range of services. So firstly, I always say they act like a bit like a dating agency between people that want to volunteer and organisations that are looking for volunteers. So volunteers centres, they just make it very easy for individuals and the organisations to connect. They offer guidance on all aspects of volunteering and provide access to IVOL, and will support people to use IVOL to its full potential, both volunteers and the organisations again. They then offer ongoing support for volunteers and organisations, making sure that everyone has a really good, positive experience. And then lastly, for organisations, they provide advice on all things volunteer management, helping to develop those strong volunteer programmes in their local communities. So as volunteer centres are in every county in Ireland, they are there for both urban and rural communities and understand the differences and challenges that face both. So volunteering, as we know, has a profound social and cultural impact. It promotes social cohesion, reduces isolation, builds stronger, more resilient communities. Particularly in rural areas, volunteers often play a critical role in maintaining social infrastructure, from running local sports clubs to organising cultural events. And these activities help to foster that community spirit and help preserve cultural traditions. So one cultural tradition I just want to talk about is that of mehel. So mehel is a traditional Irish concept of community cooperation and collective work, and it is closely associated with rural communities. It's the practice of that community coming together to help each other voluntarily with those big tasks of work, such as harvesting or maybe building a house, or in Ireland, cutting turf. So some key features of mehel include, now I cannot say this word for love nor money, reciprocity, social bonding, and efficiency and sustainability. And although traditional mehel has declined, mainly due to industrialisation and mechanisation, the spirit of collective cooperative volunteering such as MEHOD still exists in many parts of rural Ireland today. Rural initiatives such as tidy towns or community development programs and rural aid programs embody that MEHOD philosophy. And organisations like Volunteer Ireland aim to sort of foster that modern form of MEHOD by encouraging collective action for community benefit. So therefore, MEHOD does remain an important part of Irish identity, emphasising the power of solidarity, kindness and shared effort in making rural life more sustainable and connected. However, volunteering in rural Ireland is obviously not without its challenges. Rural communities have fewer people who have multiple responsibilities, making it harder to find volunteers. This can lead to over-reliance on the same core of volunteers, leading to burnout. There can obviously be big distances between homes and where volunteering may happen, and this can be made even more troublesome by the lack of public transport for those without cars. Some rural areas have poor internet access, making online recruitment more challenging and reducing the opportunity for remote volunteering. Many people have more than one job or have demanding farming jobs, and this combined with economic hardship means that people may prioritise paid work over volunteering. And in rural Ireland, a lack of media outlets limits the communication around volunteer opportunities. Many rural organisations rely on word of mouth, quite simply, which may not reach potential new volunteers. And also some rural communities have tight-knit social circles, which is great, but make it difficult for newcomers to get involved. And as well as this, organisations may struggle to have sort of new volunteer models accepted that differ from sort of the traditional, or this is how we've always done it, sort of way of being. So one way to address some of these challenges is to embrace new trends in volunteering, which will in turn broaden volunteer bases. Some strategies for change would include being more inclusive by reaching out and involving people who are not like you or not like the normal people you would engage. So this could include young people, people from new communities, people with different abilities or disabilities, or maybe providing supports for family volunteering programs to take place. Aim to break down the barriers that prevent people from volunteering by reducing that expectation of time commitment. So not every week, once a week for 3 years. And maybe create flexible schedules that suit rural life, or just partner people up for added support. By creating better defined volunteer roles as opposed to just coming to help out, you can also really give someone a sense of what they will be doing and how they will be helping. Let people sort of try before they buy too, making roles easy for you to sort of sell to them, if, as it were. And lastly, embrace flexibility. This is, as Eva was talking about, flexibility as well. This is the key change that we have noticed in volunteering over the last few years. So, for example, you could, instead of having one volunteer for 3 hours a week every week, you could have 4 volunteers doing 1 week each for a month. You could have task-based roles. So by splitting a volunteer role into individual tasks, making it easier and more attractive to potential volunteers. And then that episodic and once-off volunteering, which is just hugely on the rise and sought after by many groups of people, particularly young people and those with busy lives, which is, you know, pretty much all of us. So this provides a nice little segue into what I want to talk about next, which is a program of exactly that, flexible and episodic volunteering, which is the Community Volunteers Programme. So the Community Volunteers Programme was born during COVID as a response to what happened at that time. So what we saw was the urgent and rapid mobilisation of volunteers across the country. Unfortunately, these volunteers had little training and experienced quite a lot of poor volunteer management. So a small pool of volunteers were lent upon, which led to volunteer burnout and which also lacked diversity. And because of this and other reasons, we saw a huge rise in informal and ad hoc type of volunteering. So what was needed and what the Community Volunteers Programmes delivers is a pool of trained urgent response volunteers ready to go if and when they are required. Good volunteer management, which is key to ensuring that volunteers are engaged safely and meaningfully. And they have continuous engagement, which helps people feel a part of rather than apart from, and they can then be engaged quickly and efficiently. And we also have a diverse range of roles, so there's something for all interests and all skill sets. And by having a diverse group of volunteers, there is no reliance on the same small subsection, and all sections of society are represented. Lastly, short-term flexible roles, as we say, are on the rise and ever more popular. So what exactly is the Community Volunteers Programme? The Community Volunteers Programme offers the opportunity for people across Ireland to connect with and support their neighbours and the wider community in times of crisis and in times of celebration. So there are three main beneficiaries: volunteers, organisations and the community. The programme provides meaningful, short-term and episodic volunteer roles, allowing people to volunteer in a way that suits their lifestyle while building deeper connections within their communities. So volunteers are recruited by the local volunteer centres. They are interviewed, skill assessed and trained. Then they can either volunteer directly through their volunteer centre or with a local organisation who has partnered with the volunteer centre to engage the community volunteers locally. So how does the programme work for volunteers?
The Community Volunteers Programme is a new way for people to get involved and support their communities locally. When you sign up as a community volunteer, you're putting your hand up to say you want to be there to support your community. Whether that's at a local event or when a more urgent need arises. You can experience your community from a different perspective, meet new people, take part in training, and have fun. With projects and events throughout the year, choose what interests you and volunteer when it fits your schedule. Visit our website to learn more.
So for organisations, the programme works in a different way. Community volunteers can support the needs of partner organisations, and these organisations might be as big as local authorities or government departments as well, but also any number of smaller community and voluntary organisations. So because these volunteers are trained in urgent community support and event volunteering best practice, they are ready to be engaged by an organisation at short notice. And as such, when they do, it's led by local need and is complementing and supporting rather than replacing those existing services. So the programme also supports local communities in many ways. So the Community Volunteers Programme has created that pool of diverse, trained, flexible and enthusiastic volunteers, meaning that communities in Ireland are now better placed to respond quickly and effectively to provide urgent community support in times of need, whether this be at the local or the national level. So how community volunteers differ compared to other emergency volunteer programmes is that we keep the volunteers engaged and connected with their communities by also engaging them in those community events and festivals. So inadvertently, the programme also strengthens communities by reducing loneliness and isolation and has a positive effect on people's mental health and enables new arrivals to integrate into their communities. So who is involved? Who are the driving forces behind community volunteers? As we've said, community volunteers is a collaboration supported from the top down by our national government, or more specifically, the Department of Rural and Community Development. And it's an action in our national strategy, as well as mentioned in the National Risk and Resilience Plan. Additionally, it is supported by the local government authorities, the county councils across the country. Then, of course, ourselves, Volunteer Ireland, and the Community Volunteers Programme Manager, who provide a centralised support to the programme, ensuring standardisation and quality throughout. Volunteer centres then manage the programme locally by recruiting, training and managing volunteers, as well as developing the relationships with organisations hoping to engage community volunteers to further their mission. And then lastly, of course, it's you, me, and us. It's the volunteers. So for newcomers to Ireland, joining community volunteers has many benefits. One key benefit is the chance to integrate into their new community. It can help reduce those feelings of isolation, build a sense of belonging, and create opportunities to engage with diverse groups, and it helps to promote mutual understanding. So being a community volunteer is a unique way to learn about Irish culture through direct interaction with local groups, and it fosters that sort of cultural exchange, allowing both newcomers and locals to share experiences and learn from each other. If someone moves within Ireland, the programme makes it easy to transfer their volunteer experience with the help of the network of volunteer centres. And lastly, by receiving a letter of participation confirming their involvement with the programme, new arrivals have something to support them when applying for work or residency applications or just enhancing their CV. Here's just a very brief example of just some of the roles that our volunteers and the events that they participate in. So we have the events and festivals, the urgent response, and then we're just having an increasing amount of climate action events as well, which all helps to build community resilience. Okay, so just some statistics. So at the end of 2024, there were 5,134 community volunteers ready to be deployed should there be a need. And of these, there were 110 different nationalities, which is great. And all these people volunteered for 41,137 hours at 401 different events and responses. And here are just some of those events and responses in graphic detail. Okay, so how do people become a community volunteer? How do they get involved? So people can either contact their local volunteer centre, or they can express their interest on IVOL, the National Volunteering Database, or they can go through the Volunteer Ireland website. So there's lots of ways to get involved. And so in summary then, community volunteers are a pool of volunteers ready to go when an urgent need arises, either nationally or locally. They are kept engaged through volunteering at community events through a wide variety of opportunities that are flexible and episodic in nature. It is a very inclusive programme that also supports integration for new arrivals really well. So the programme is a more flexible approach for individuals to contribute to their community through volunteering. Any questions?
Thanks very much, Vicky, for this impressive presentation. I saw one question from Wendy, I think. Wendy, you can put it forward yourself.
Yes, it's really interesting to see how you adapt to how people volunteer and want to volunteer. So my question would be, if you have those national databases of people enlisting, how do you see these changes also in a way a volunteer opportunity is listed, for instance, in the national databases? And do you have a role in that, maybe like advising organization and you shouldn't do this or you should do differently or you should carve it up or whatever?
Yes, so in conjunction with the volunteer centres, we would advise on best practice volunteer management, which is why we try to keep on top of any trends that are happening. We talk a lot to volunteer involving organisations. We have a training and capacity building team here that would be we have volunteer manager conferences. We do much with volunteer managers, so we talk to them and find out what their challenges are and then how we can help them. So the volunteer centres, they would advise volunteer involving organisations on the best way to write role descriptions, how to capture the volunteers that they require. So it's really just about communication training. We do a lot of training with volunteer managers, as do the volunteer centres. So yeah, it's just that sort of two-way communication with the volunteer centres and volunteer managers. We have a very relaxed coffee morning twice a month actually. So volunteer managers online can come along and just chat about different issues with their peer-to-peer, because as you probably know, volunteer managers are very isolated in their roles. So we give them an opportunity to get together and discuss challenges they might have. Does that answer your question?
Thank you.
Yeah.
William, please.
Yes. Well, first I want to congratulate both of you. This is tremendous work, and the way it's structured and organized. Well, we've got in Flanders a long way to go. What I was wondering is what is the relation between the two speakers and the organization. Could I see you as a more practical implementation of what the other one is more on civil and governmental issue, or is the interdependent role somewhat different?
Well, we do work closely with Department of Rural Community Development. They are our, I don't know, Aoife, would you like to explain?
I think I would call us close partners, Vicky. I think that's the best way to describe.
You're kind of partners. Okay.
Yeah, I think so. Like Volunteer Ireland is very much an independent organisation rather than a government agency or anything.
Oh, so, yeah, I see.
But very close partners, and I think we've always had a really good, close relationship. Is that fair, Vicky? I don't want to pull you our right arm because I think that would be unfair on you. But certainly,
I think that's absolutely fair.
We're the dry government side, and Vicky does the exciting bits.
We're down with the people, yeah.
I figured it out a bit in that way from your explanation, but I see that the collaboration between the two is and the way you're complementary is if I understood it correctly, is quite good. The second one is more on the field, and the first one is puts the how should I put it, the legal and the framework. I was looking for the word, the framework, so to be also that registration, that national registration is a hell of a good idea. If you could work and keep on working and implementing, like Wendy that said, the new roles in that's a great job. Congrats.
Okay.
Yeah, I think with the uniqueness around Ireland is the fact that is our volunteering network. The fact that we have a department that is focused on volunteering, and then we have ourselves, the National Development Agency, and then we have the volunteer centres. So, when we all work together. So I think that's our strength.
Okay, thanks. Jane, you had a question.
Hello, yes. Yes, just quite interested in, Vicky, how you gather the hours that people give. Does everybody have to register on iVol in terms of being able to have those hours recorded? Is that a barrier in terms of that digital expectation that people do that, or is there different ways in terms of how you gather the information statistics?
So again, we're lucky because of the volunteer centres. They tend to do most of that inputting of data. So the volunteer managers, the volunteer centre staff will manage the volunteers on a lot of the occasions that the community volunteers are volunteering. So they will know who's turned up, who's come, who's volunteered, and for how long they've volunteered. They will then go back and every event that they provide, we have Salesforce behind iVol. So all the volunteers are registered on Salesforce, and then it's a matter of adding them to an event campaign and then adding their hours to the shift. And that's how we pull the hours from Salesforce with the magic of our IVOL super administrator.
That's great. That's, I suppose that's interesting that your volunteer centres are doing that admin rather than the volunteers doing it. So thank you for that.
Yeah, well, in theory, some of the volunteers would do it, but unfortunately, some of our volunteers might not be very computer literate or not have access to Wi-Fi. So, yeah, you can drop me a line, Jane, and we can talk more about it if you like.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks.
So there was also one question in the chat. If you have a formal vetting process?
Yeah, we have what we call Garda vetting process. So each, if somebody is working with vulnerable people or children, then we ask them to submit a Garda vetting to. There's various organisations that will run the process for you, but yes, there is a formal vetting process.
Okay, thanks. And there was a question also for how involving new people in Ireland, in urban areas, how that works.
Sorry, what? Say that again?
Yeah, there was perhaps you could look into the chat. That would be nice. Also looking at the time.
Much for new people for Ireland and in urban areas.
Yeah. And Vanessa has a question, I think.
No, in urban areas as much as rural areas, there is as much community sort of organisation for celebration as well and emergency. But in all areas in Ireland, it is just we're very good at that sort of stuff.
Okay, Vanessa.
Yeah. Well, first of all, that's absolutely amazing what you were telling us about. I mean, really, Ireland is leading the pack on these things. And I thought particularly your community volunteers program was really quite special. And I also think it's amazing the way you've involved so many incomers. 110 nationalities is quite incredible. That's almost the whole world. And from all your pictures and everything, you could see, that your immigrant populations and your refugee populations and everything were very involved in this program, which is what we need. It's absolutely what we need so people can get into their communities and can benefit from being part of them. One thing I just wanted to ask, you didn't mention exactly, and maybe you don't have figures available, but it also looks like it could be quite an expensive program to run. Do you have any ideas about the cost of running this on an annual basis?
Yeah, I work with the department. Aoife and I are laughing because the budget is just a bit of a nightmare. But yeah, we do have an annual budget which is divided between the volunteer centres for different things. They have a base funding, and then depending on targets, they will get a bit more funding, and they also get specific funding for uniforms, volunteer expenses, and also for PPE, personal protective equipment. And then some money comes to the central point to support me to run the standardization and the centralized support of the program as well, the training and different aspects too.
Okay, thanks, Vicky. And we perhaps later on we can also go into some other details. But for now, I would like to introduce our third speaker, Leila Zijic-Rilic. Leila is the president of the Center for European Volunteering, and she is also president of the Croatian Volunteer Development Center, and she was founder and is still managing director of The Collective, which is a volunteer center in Osijek. She is a volunteer coordinator, civil society leader and activist since 1993, mentor for the implementation of quality assurance systems for non-profit organizations. She's trainer and consultant for organizational development and development of quality volunteer programs in non-profit organizations. She's the president of the Center of European Volunteering, and this is a network of over 60 organizations dedicated to the promotion of and support to volunteers and volunteering in Europe at European, national or regional level. Leila, yeah. Happy to have you here. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Ben, and greetings to everybody. It's a great pleasure to be here today and speak on behalf of Center for European Volunteering. which is a network that was founded in 92, and it has over 60 members that come across Europe, not just from the European Union. And many of our members are networks themselves, and they are key actors in developing and supporting volunteering in their countries. I'm so glad to have Volunteer Ireland with us today, because Volunteer Ireland is one of our very valuable members. And I have been personally working a long years with the organization, and we have been implementing many projects in partnership and learning together with Volunteer Ireland and learning from Volunteer Ireland, which is really a great asset that Europe has. And I think just on the very beginning, it's really worth to emphasize where is the most, I mean, it is well-deserved, recognized also from the speakers here, that this represents one of the shining examples of volunteer development in one European country. And where do I see the main reason for it? It's a really that synergy of the synergy of engagement initiative or spirit that lies in the community, whether it's Mehel or the Dagnat spirit, whatever we call it in our societies. But the spirit doesn't develop itself. And then we have a very good established volunteer infrastructure, which is really important. I know in many cases, because volunteering is it's perceived still as a very spontaneous activity, there is a misperception very often that it doesn't need an infrastructure to support it. But we know now, because we have been studying it for decades now, we see that the strength of a good established infrastructure is very important. But then again, it doesn't go without political will and investment from the state. So here in Irish example, I think this is what makes this example such a good example. It's this synergy of political will and policy environment and investment from the state, good volunteer infrastructure, and then of course the awareness that social cohesion and equal opportunities are really important. And I think that is in the heart of when we talk about rural areas and the potential of that volunteering and civic engagement can bring to this area. Well, but also let me just give you a little bit of a European picture. The European picture is very diverse, and it goes from such a good example of this synergy from all important stakeholders to a very little political will and support. And in the middle, of course, you can find a very good developed civil society, and with political will changing. We also have to know that we live now at the present moment where we are witnessing shrinking space for civil society and for volunteer engagement, even in, unfortunately, European countries. But across Europe, rural communities are at the heart of cultural heritage, resilience, and self-reliance. And we in CV think this is a very, very important topic and important bridge when we talk about connecting the issue of rural communities and that are in many cases lack accessible services and opportunities, especially for young people. And these challenges often lead to feelings of isolation, inequality, growing disconnect between rural areas and national, and especially even EU policies. We see that disconnection. And we think, of course, civil society and volunteer engagement can really bridge these gaps. And I think that's why this topic and today's event is really very valuable and important one. In rural areas, volunteering is not just about giving time. I mean, anywhere else, but in rural areas specifically, it's about sustaining community, as many of you said. That social glue that keeps people connected, supporting neighbors, preserving traditions in many cases, running services that would otherwise disappear. In many places in Europe, without civil society, that there won't be services in that areas. That collaborative spirit that drives this collective action is, I think, really priceless. We on a European level, especially at CEV, recognize that volunteering in rural areas cannot be a copy-paste version of urban volunteering. And it is shaped by the unique context, identity, and needs of each community. As Vicky mentioned, rural volunteering is often informal, deeply rooted in local networks, and based on mutual trust and reciprocity. And that means our strategies must also reflect that diversity. And one-size-fits-all approach don't work. Instead, we need enabling environments that are flexible, accessible, and designed to support the rural reality. All the challenges Vicky has shared, I think they are very, very much common challenges across Europe. Time is changing, and it's changing very fast. And we need to show a really agile approach to how do we support volunteering in general, and especially taking into account the specifics of distant communities. One of the lessons we've learned from European Volunteering Capital competition that CEV is organizing for over the past 10 years, that our candidates, and we had very variety of them, many of them have been big capitals, but we also had small communities, and one of the Irish communities, small communities, Sligo was a smaller community. Sligo was one of our capitals, and we also had this year we had a candidate, we also had a capital candidate from Ireland, also a small community. So what we learned is that success happens when volunteering is part of an integral local development plan. So it cannot be treated as an island issue. It has to be interconnected and comprehensively included into a wider plan. And when municipalities invest in volunteer infrastructure, create inclusive volunteer strategies, and recognize the contribution of local people, they unlock something powerful, and that is a sense of ownership and belonging. And that is something we really learned over this past decade. In fact, rural volunteering can often serve as a counterbalance to shrinking space, the phenomenon that I already mentioned, because when formal institutions retreat or they are absent in some cases, then very often volunteering steps in. For example, in Croatia, we had, during pandemic, we had a devastating earthquake. And I can say here that our government really wasn't very good in organizing this crisis response, especially in the communities, especially those that these aspects that should be coming from the solidarity part of citizen spirit. But then there was a river of volunteers who stepped in. And I think we all learned in that process, our government, we as civil society, how to treat this crisis volunteering, how the government can better support it. So this is also something that it's worth having in mind when we talk about the benefits of volunteers in our communities, especially when we know these days that we somehow live in a constant cycles or repeating cycles of crisis. And we know that there is a climate change. We know that there is an insecurity now with these raised conflicts around us. So resilience of our communities really depends on our citizens and how we invite them to be a part of that resilience plan, so to say. One of our current priorities is ensuring that volunteering is embedded into local government tasks and responsibilities as a strategic element of community well-being, and CV has is working on that priorities. In rural context, this means recognizing the role of volunteers. For example, in many of these events that, for example, Vicky has mentioned, whether it's a fire brigades, youth associations, or special events that are organized in these communities. We also need to think about the intergenerational potential of rural volunteering. We know that for a fact that the intergenerational gap is widening because of the very, very speeded development, especially in this digital technology part of our societies. And this gap is unfortunately widening. So we see volunteering and civic engagement as a good response to these gaps. When we talk about digital inclusion, which we believe is one of the very important trends that can be addressed, volunteering is built on a human connection. It's always an encounter, whether it's between people with nature, or it's with people with the problems and challenges in their communities, or with potentials in their communities. So this is, I think, something that is a really a very valuable point to carry us and to face the challenges that digital development and the technological development is bringing us. And it is a counterpoint in that sense.
Okay.
It enables our learning, visibility, and broader networks. I know there is a lot to say, but let's stop here. We can continue in smaller groups and see what I will do.
Right. Thanks. Yeah, that's a good idea, Leila. So thanks very much for broadening our perspective. And as you say, it's nice also to come into some discussions with all our people that are now here on board. So that now we are going to take for a exciting operation to divide you over 40 breakout rooms, 4 breakout rooms. Louise, can people see, or I can mention the titles of the breakout rooms? How can we manage this? So I will, you have seen also the titles in the convocation, but just short, the room 1 will be on the benefits of volunteering for organizations. So it's more about the organizations, and Miriam McKenna will be the moderator on that. The second will be on how to attract or retain volunteers. So how can we keep them on board? And Vanessa will moderate that. The third room will be increasing demands on volunteers. So how about this pressure on volunteers? How can we manage that? And the fourth would be on succession planning for volunteers. How can organizations community plan for one? But could you come in for your last words? Because you was interrupted very much. I don't see your real name, but I think when I say Butts, then you know we are. Yeah, come in.
My name is Nora Lucid, and I work in family resource centres. There's 121 in the whole country. But I said we're quite unique. I had it in my head all along, but someone kind of just kick-started me there. And I wanted a training program for young people, and this would fall directly into it, to have a volunteers, train them as volunteers and for skills for life, and let them utilise that back in the community.
It's about a training program that should be funded also. I understand.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Thanks. Okay. Thank you. Then you could finish your thing. So I think we should have a short overview of the results of the the different breakout rooms, and let me first go to Miriam. You talked about the benefits of volunteering for organizations, and could you bring us a few special results of your discussion? What was the output? You're muted, Miriam. Yeah.
Now, can you hear me okay?
Yeah. There you are.
Me. I had to unmute. So our group, we had 4 people in our group. So one lady was from Sweden, that was Lena, and she spoke about how the benefits, that it was very meaningful personally for her to be working with others and to help to further the organization that she was working with. She also spoke then about the refugees that came in to their area, and how they're now beginning to do a survey, because these refugees have moved on, and they're now beginning to do a survey to find out how they have interacted with the other areas that they have moved. I thought that was a really, really good idea. We also had Aoife, who was there from the department, and Aoife spoke while she's working full-time at the moment and only volunteers locally, but she also notes that in the recent storm, the amount of volunteers that came out, that it was truly astounding, and I think we would have said the same for all over the country. But she also said that that when you talk about the amount of refugees that we've had coming into Ireland, that the integration that they have had coming into the community has been wonderful. And then we also spoke about how when you volunteer, not only does it do something very good for yourself and help both your mental and your physical person, but it also helps the people that you are working with as well. So there were plenty of benefits, and I will write them up.
Okay, thanks. Then we go to Vanessa.
Yeah, sorry, I've just been, there's not very much time to gather thoughts, I'm afraid.
Yeah.
We had quite a full conversation. We had 2 people from Volunteer Ireland, which was great, and somebody from Meals on Wheels in Ireland. And so basically we were looking barriers that seem to be, there was quite a lot of talk about barriers, but interesting things were things like perception. So this is not my kind of people, they're older than me, it's not something I can do, etc. Transport is a big barrier, because particularly for new arrivals who may not have their own cars, getting around to these opportunities. Funding, of course, is always a barrier. And there's a barrier about generations and about aging and about perception of aging. And there's a barrier in lack of awareness in people in society as a whole about, this is an opportunity, this is something you may want to do. In terms of attracting more people, we had a lot to say about that. Information, visibility, flexibility, we were hearing about that in the presentations. Tell people the full story so they know what it's all about. Give the different messages to the different audiences, so a young person in this place or, whatever may want a different message than somebody else. Make it cool. Profile young people in the way that you're advertising it. Engage with people, and particularly to do that where people are in their own places and communities. Make it accessible. Word of mouth is a really important thing, particularly with the immigrant communities. Apparently, word of mouth has been a very big way in which they've passed on, the message. Make people feel very welcome. The branding, for instance, in Volunteer Ireland was really interesting. All the T-shirts and everything, which made people feel part of a sort of like an army almost, of volunteers. That you had that identity and people respected it. And also with some of the roles. I was talking about problems of finding a treasurer in an organization. Break the roles down into tasks and don't give people a whole role which terrifies them. Give them bits of a task so you're job sharing. You're not just, you've signed up to be the treasurer for heaven knows how long. In terms of support from government and things, we didn't go deeply into that, but obviously in Ireland, the strategy has been really crucial. It gives the whole framework. and the government supports that, and the fact it's going on to a second strategy, is very positive. So that raises awareness, it provides esteem for the whole business, and also funding. And funding, of course, is critical from governments. Okay. And that's as far as we got, actually.
Great. Thanks, Vanessa. Then we go to Wendy.
Yes. We had our room was about increasing demand on volunteers, and especially governance, funding applications, legislations, and volunteer burnout. And we had a group with mainly from Scotland and Ireland, and I was the Dutch participant. And first in the discussion, obviously, came about that it's a lot of difference if you're like in a small Scottish rural community where you have to do everything with each other because there are not a lot of other facility around, or where you are in a larger community, so you can also mix formal and informal roles. But it also meant that if you are in a small village in Scotland, it's not only about volunteering for tasks you would like to do, but also do the facility management of the church in which you convene. And it's often not possible to say, I'm not doing that, because otherwise it would not be there. So that meant that we actually had a discussion about the difference between what you would call formal volunteering and informal volunteering, and that you find in general that a lot of people on the formal side of volunteering have a sort of trustee roles with formal positions, and especially if you have those kind of roles, you need a lot more skills than somebody who does task-related things and chooses, I want to do this and this not. So that means actually that the context and what is possible, it's a lot of defining how you should do that and which choices or solutions you have. So in general, actually, we find that the most things you can only do for those volunteers is give them guidance, provide them with information, and provide them with emotional supports where it gets difficult. Yeah. But it also seemed like it's also enduring because sometimes you do not see other solutions.
Yeah, okay, thanks. Coming to the last room, the breakout room where I was present. The first thing is to say, and that's also about the other three breakout rooms. I think that what is again here the questions, the problems, the challenges that we are facing on volunteering are very similar. So we recognize a lot of our challenges. If we are from Croatia or Ireland or the Netherlands, the resemblance is big. And that was also the experience in my breakout room. That, for instance, as the question was, how can you plan about succession? That is a real problem in Ireland, in Sweden, in Germany, in Croatia. So we face the same questions and the same problems. To solve these problems, a few things were said. I will mention these. One thing is, like Jane said, it is about pre-planning. Bring this early enough on the table to discuss how can you make the succession for the people that are now there. The second thing was that there is a difference between volunteering in committees or boards or volunteering in actual being active in this society, and it is more difficult to find follow-up for people that are acting in committees or boards, and that is a problem that is still becoming bigger. Another thing, and I think that was very interesting and hopeful, what Sophia said from Sweden. Her statement was that finding volunteers is in urban areas more difficult than in rural areas, because in rural areas this idea that you are part of a community and you have to contribute to this community is still very much more present, and perhaps we could, that's my addition to this, we could make this more visible, that even in rural areas, this being a volunteer is more part of how we live together. That was a nice thing to say. And Sophie also mentioned the important thing, and that is about, again, these people coming into boards or committees, or broader, is mentorship. Have good mentorship to help these people to come forward. Another a special thing in our group was that finding young people, that this issue of that there are young people struggling with a lot of mental issues at the moment. And for that, volunteering could be also a help to them to become more more self-esteem. And Leila mentioned that there are now also studies to understand more what these young generations what they want, what how we should understand these young generations in their needs. For instance, they are more focused on social actions. They are less formal. They want to have more participation. They it is not, you can say them, this you have to do. They want to discuss how your organization is built up. So we should understand them. And on the other hand, what Barbara mentioned is also make clear that volunteering comes with responsibilities, and be honest about that. So I think we did not find the magic wand to solve all these problems. But for me, is what is good to know and to feel that we face the same issues, the same challenges, and every one of us is working on that and trying to find solutions. And coming together like on these moments is very important, because you can learn a lot from each other. And that would be for me the bridge to come to Leila again, because she is the one that has this overview, and she organizes also this exchange of knowledge and how we can solve these problems. So Leila, please take the floor for your last statements, yeah. and perhaps also a takeaway message that we can stay on, that we have hope for the future for this important issue of volunteering. Yeah, the floor is yours, Leila.
Hope is really in the essence of volunteering, and yeah, I think we should think about that when we talk about volunteering. Very short, I'd like to come back to something very simple, but I think powerful: the idea of presence. In rural communities, the presence of a neighbor, of a helping hand, of a supportive network, of presence of services that people need, because when we talk about rural communities, distance is always something that we talk about. So let's put the presence in the heart of it. And I think volunteering really is in the heart of presence. And that is something I think to take away from this gathering. I'm very grateful for being here, for being present here and taking some of the learnings from here. I hope that Center for European Volunteering and your network will have more opportunities in the future to cooperate on this very important, very, very important topic. I think lately we have realized that when talking about volunteering, and if we want to face all of these challenges of, in many cases also polarized and divide communities, lonely communities and lonely people, because loneliness is also rising. We need to talk about the community spirit and what does community mean to us, and how volunteering can, and I believe it can strongly support the social cohesion and community. So thank you once again for inviting me, and we remain, of course, accessible for all of your initiatives or questions in the future. And yes, I once again, the example of Ireland And Volunteer Ireland as an organization is something we should promote and take with us.
Thanks. Thanks. Then I go back to Vanessa. Please, can you wave us into the weekend?
Right, yes. Well, what a fantastic session. Really interesting session. You always feel you need about 5 more hours to complete such a discussion. But I think it's always valuable to get international perspectives. And thank you hugely to the contributors from Ireland. You know, that the work you're doing there is really inspirational. And I think we can all learn quite a lot from that. So maybe we will pass on the message to people in our own countries. Go and talk to Ireland. Yeah, so basically, this wraps up our webinar on volunteering. As I said, we're going to be holding monthly events. So the next one will be the 25th of April, and that will be a deep dive about our member organisation in Belgium. William has now left the session, but he will be talking about what they're doing in Belgium. We're also going to be running a different event on May the 6th, which is about giving information about this Futural Horizon project that we're all involved in. And you'll get more information about that coming out through our network of members. And then there will be a program on our website, the ERCA website, which you need to look at because it's very interesting, lots of good things on there. About the program going forward beyond just the next 2 events, and Louise will be putting up a calendar of events onto that and circulating it as well. So that's all I've got to say. Ben, I don't know if you've got anything more to say, but
No, just thanks to you and Louise also for the help and the organization. It was a little bit, it went very well. So I think. Thanks to Anne and Miriam, of course, for her moderation, and Wendy, everyone which has helped in organizing this and making it to a success. Thanks very much.
Thanks very much, Ben. God bless. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Louise, we stay for a moment. Okay.